Hi everybody, Bearded Rogue here, and today I wanted to do a little bit of game design conversation. So last week I played Skyward from Rule and Make Press. I played that on live stream on the One Tars YouTube channel. I'll put a link down in the notes if you'd like to watch that. Now that it's going to be released as a recording, she puts the live stream recordings up like a week after they take place, so it should be pretty soon. But we played Skyward, and it struck me how it does a lot of things that I was trying to do in one of my earlier designs. So for those who haven't followed me for a while, those who are newer, or those who just haven't been paying attention to my game design stuff for whatever reason, my first game was a game called Elements, and in Elements, there were kind of like two pieces to the game. So there was the I divide, you choose portion, wherein you would get your element cards, which were your resources. And then there was the, formula completion portion, where you would use those resources to complete formulas that would then chain together to give you abilities to earn more resources, to complete more formulas. It was an engine building game. It was pretty good. I pitched it. I even had somebody do artwork for it at one point. The amazing Talon Strikes did artwork for it. And I had really high hopes for it, and it never really went anywhere, which made me very, very sad. It's a design that I would love to pull back off the workbench at some point and take a look at. I've posted some videos about another idea that I had, similar to Elements, with a worker placement-esque type theme, but regardless, the idea originally came from the I divide, you choose mechanism. And I personally really like I divide, you choose. It's something that a lot of people just inherently understand, because it's very much something of the world. Like, if you're a kid and there's dessert, and you have siblings like I did, we were often instructed to divide it evenly. And so you wanted to divide it as evenly as possible, but maybe a little bit more evenly for yourself. To combat this, parents, in their infinite wisdom, let other people choose first which parts they got. So if I divided and everybody else got to choose first and I got stuck with whatever's left, I was immediately incentivized to try to make it equal down to the atom if I possibly could. And so it's a self-balancing mechanism. It's a mechanism that inherently is balanced by the players, like an auction often is. Players decide the worth of things. So in this, all of the players evaluate the piles of items that are presented to them, and then choose which one benefits them the most, or conversely, which one benefits their opponent the most and they cannot allow their opponent to have. So there's some element of hate drafting, like in Seven Wonders, where you take a science card and bury it under your wonder just because you know somebody else is going science. That kind of stuff exists. So, back to how this relates to Skyward. So Skyward also has an I divide, you choose mechanism in it. And it's the first time I've seen it in a game in a while. I mean, New York Slice does it. But every I divide, you choose mechanism has to have a unique kind of twist on it, because just putting things into piles is only okay. So New York Slice's twist is that you can't reorder it. You make a pizza, and then you divide it without separating slices. So sometimes you're going to be forced to put things together, or where you draw the lines to cut the pizza depends on where things are spatially next to each other. What Skyward does is it gives you different things that you're dividing up. So in my game, Elements, everything that you were dividing were elements. You were specifically dividing element cards. So the element cards were all sorts of individual things, specifically air, earth, fire, and water, those 4 elements. And then, if you had contra elements, elements that were opposites, like fire and water, or air and earth, they would instead create a wild element called aether. So the way you would divide the piles would be to try to make it so that the elements that you wanted were present in the pile that would be left. You could do this by either intuiting what your opponents wanted and trying to put those in a pile that wasn't nearly as good as yours. You could try to make all the piles as even as possible so that no matter which one you got, you weren't unhappy. You could, there's no requirement that the piles be the same size. So, you know, if I was in a 2-player game and we were dividing 5 cards, I could make 1 pile 3 and 1 pile 2. In Elements, the amount of cards inherently made it so that you could not make them all even. So 5 cards in a 2-player game, and then a 3-player game was 7 cards, and then etc., etc. So it went up as it went. It was like n number of players plus 1, or n times 2 number of players plus 1, something like that. I can't remember. Regardless, it basically worked out to where there would be roughly 2 cards per player on average, but it couldn't divide 2 per player evenly in any way, shape, or form. You had the added wrinkle of elements of the same types creating aether, which is 1 fewer element, so they're getting fewer elements in that regard, but they're getting a more powerful element in that it is a stand-in for anything. So that was the twist that I included in mine, and I think that was pretty interesting. I think maybe the formulas and what I did with that resource mechanism setup, not as interesting, but Skyward, its twist is that it has 2 different types of things that you're using. So let me find an example here. So you have these guys, the faction cards, which are basically your resources. They give you 1 of whatever the icon is. And Skyward is very, very well done with its graphic design in that, yes, if you fan it, you'll be able to see what it is it produces, but you can also splay all of the cards 7 Wonders style so that you can see for resources what they produce, or conversely, if it's a building, which is the other type, I say buildings, some of them are like critters or vehicles, but they all work the same way. You can see that the ability and the action type and the name are all on the side, so if I cover it up, as long as I splay them diagonally, I can still see what it takes, and the cost to build it is up here. But yes, the resource itself, and then the thing that you build. So, in this case, this is a vehicle, which is just, or no, this is an airship bay, which is a building. And then there's some other stuff in here, and I'm dropping cards. Oh well, I'll pick that one up afterwards. You know, more buildings. This one takes 2 of that purpley pink resource, so you would need 2 of these in order to do this. So one of the things that so you're drafting both of these cards at the same time, so the pile may have, you know, this building and none of the resources needed to build this building. It may be this plus a green resource plus a blue resource. So this is interesting, but not great. None of the cards feed into each other, none of them help each other. However, from previous turns, I may have things that these work with. Once I've picked them up into my hand, nobody knows what it is that I have. So they may not know that they're unwittingly setting me up for something perfect. Like, for example, they could be giving me this, and I could have... Let me see if I can find one that costs something relevant. Oh, I could have this in my hand, which requires one of these blue resources here, and a wild, and they're giving me a green. I don't need a green for anything, so I could build this building because of this pile. They don't know that this building is in my hand, or they may if they're card counting or they remember, but this building itself has no use with these. And you have to pay attention to what people have on the table to see synergies and energy and synergies and engine type combos. And as you get more familiar with the game, these will become more apparent. So I think this is a game that actually will benefit from more plays and from more familiarity. I think it will actually become a tighter game as the players self-balance it through the I divide you choose mechanism, because their valuation of the resources that you can divide will be more accurate. This can lead to some issues in that, you know, some of the things that you're getting have ability text on them. Like, in Elements, I specifically avoided making the I divide you choose portion have any kind of reading be necessary. Because when you have a stack of cards, like, for example, if you're a 4-player game, you'll have 16 cards that you're dividing. In up to 4 piles. You don't have to make a pile, but of course the self-balancing there is if you don't make a 4th pile, you're unlikely to get a pile of cards because you get whatever everybody else didn't take. So 16 cards can be really overwhelming in a first play. Like, I've got a hand of 16 cards, and now I have to try to decide how to divide them up. You know, it's almost guaranteed that you'll make some sort of a mistake the first couple times that you do it, or the first couple times that you play. One of the other things Skyward does is you have a the added token for the start player that you put into one of the piles, and it chooses who gets to do the dividing next round. Which is kind of a double-edged sword. In the game that we played, sometimes people really didn't want to do the dividing, and it was kind of like poisoning the pot. So I'm going to put this in here, which means that next turn you're going to get a really crappy turn if you take this, which would be pretty good for you this turn. Or sometimes I really want to be the person doing the dividing next turn because I need to make sure that this resource shows up in as many piles as possible. Or I have these resources in my hand, so I need to make sure that there's a building in each pile that I can build so that no matter what I get, I can build something next round. There's all sorts of strategic considerations that come up because of this, but it's why I love the I divide you choose mechanism and why I wanted to use it in a game. Elements, I started working on it, gosh, 4 years ago, 5 years ago at this point. And it's been shelved for a little while, but games like Skyward or like New York Slice show me that the I divide you choose mechanism has a lot of uses in it, and Skyward is a game that Elements could have become. If I shuffled the formula cards that you complete with your elements into the same deck and divided those up, it would be very similar to Skyward as far as engine building goes. The game I designed isn't that game. I don't want to design this game again, but it made me really appreciate this one, having played in that space as a designer. They did a really good job. The fact that some of their cards have abilities on them, and you have to factor that in when sorting it, sometimes makes the I divide you choose portion take a little longer than I would like. But the rest of the game, the actual building of buildings and all of those operational steps are ridiculously fast. So the meat of the game is the I divide you choose mechanism, which showcases it properly. One could argue that one of the biggest problems with Elements is that the I divide you choose mechanism was how you gathered resources, and that it wasn't tied as tightly to the formula completion side of things, and that was the real issue with it and why it didn't go anywhere with publishers. It could just be that it was a card game of medium weight that came out or was being pitched during a time in which micro games were the thing. So it was too big to be a micro game, and it was too small to be a heavy game. And it was all cards and tokens, so a lot of publishers didn't know where it would fit into their lineup. I still don't know if it really has a place in a lineup, but games like Skyward make me feel very hopeful that it may have some kind of second life going forward. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. Was I played a game, reminded me of a game I designed in a very positive way, and gave me kind of a new perspective on my own designs. So the moral of the story is, as a designer, play games. You never know what you might see. It may pull something out of your slush pile, or it may let you know that you can stop working on a design because the game that you were trying to create already exists in the world, and you can just play it and be happy. But that's it, guys. Bearded Rogue signing out.